This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And in the studio with me, Charles Sauer, Libertarian economist and president of the Market Institute. MarketInstitute.org is the website. You can tweet him at Charles Sauer, S-A-U-E-R. Charles, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
You know, I wanted to talk to you this week. We have very, very different visions of America and the world economically.
Yep.
You and I, we're at the extreme ends of the spectrum, I would say. And
we both want what's best, though.
Absolutely. I believe, I don't doubt that at all. And it's one of the reasons that I keep talking to you is that I think you're a no BS guy, even though I disagree with you. But that said, let's step out of the economic frame for a minute and talk about how liberals and libertarians view America as empire. Yep. This is a conversation that I'm really curious to have. Nafiz Ahmed wrote a piece for the Think Progress blog, I'm pretty sure. Oh no, it was Medium? Yeah, okay. It didn't print the footer here. So it's at medium.com, right? Okay, thank you, Troy. This was over at medium.com, and it's titled Pentagon Study Declares American Empire is Collapsing. Report demands massive expansion of military-industrial complex to maintain, quote, global access to resources, which kind of tells you what we're all about. And this is from the study. This is what the Pentagon said. And I quote, while the United States remains a global political, economic, and military giant, it no longer enjoys an unassailable position versus state competitors. In brief, the status quo that was hatched and nurtured by U.S. strategists after World War II and has for decades been the principal beat of the Department of Defense is not merely fraying, but may in fact be collapsing. This is the Pentagon talking about U.S. primacy in the world collapsing. Yeah. The order and its constituent parts, back to quoting from the study, first emerged from World War II, were transformed to a unipolar system with the collapse of the Soviet Union. In other words, it was no longer us versus the Soviet Union. It was just basically us, and have by and large been dominated by the United States and its major Western and Asian allies, Europe and Japan principally, and South Korea, since. Status quo forces collectively are comfortable with their dominant roles in dictating the terms of international security outcomes and resist the emergence of rival centers of power and authority. All states and traditional political authority structures are under increasing pressure from endogenous and exogenous forces, in other words, from within and from without. The fracturing of the post-Cold War global system is accompanied by the internal fraying, this is within our countries, in the political, social, and economic fabric of practically all states. This is reading something like, who wrote The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire?
Sorry, I'm not going to get it for you.
It's been 40 years since I read it. But in any case, this is that. It looks to me like we're looking at the end of empire, and yet we have this budget going forward that's over $600 billion for the military, under $600 billion, 500 and some odd $billion for everything else that our government does. Much of it, vilified by you, I get that, but still, aren't these proportions out of whack? And why, why should American kids go to war fighting and dying in at least half the places in the world where we're?
This is a great topic, right? So first off, I've been in here week after week, month after month, and I always fight for free markets. And this is one place where it's interesting because you walk into a room full of Republicans who I'm used to being on my side on free markets. And then you start talking about military spending and they say, no, we just need to expand. We need more. We need more. And you can hear it in a lot of places. The Heritage Foundation was for something called the Alternative Engine for our new plane, the I think it's the F-35. And they were for that alternative engine, although all of our military leaders were opposed to it. The president was opposed to it. The head of the Pentagon was opposed to it. Everybody in line with the program was opposed to it. But, funding was important to them or their donors for the program.
So there's probably a path there from the company that makes that engine to a lobbying firm here in Washington, D.C., passing out money, not just to think tanks, but also to politicians.
The line is there, and that explains that part of it. But I was talking to some people about data privacy today, and the rationality goes out the door when we start talking about foreign policy, because a lot of people are like, oh no, we're in trouble if we lose our data privacy. So the line is there on lobbying. So it's kind of like the perfect storm of bad policy on the right. The lobbying money's there, plus this bad thoughts that, you know, anybody foreign is going to come hurt us or will hurt our country and our economy. And that's, of course, just wrong. But really, where we get into this problem, I think, and I think it says it in that report, basically, is that as a country, we don't really have a foreign policy. The left doesn't necessarily have a foreign policy. The right doesn't necessarily have a foreign policy. You and I haven't talked about it that much. The libertarians are generally isolationists. I'm actually more of an objectivist. If you threaten us, I'm okay with military action, but that means something like Syria wouldn't have been something. You know, there's higher people on the list: China, Russia, Iran, and then you aren't just going to attack China or Russia. So you actually have to make rational decisions about how you're going to deal with them.
Right, and it's unlikely that Syria is ever going to do anything to the United States. I mean, you know, it's just like Saddam Hussein represented no threat to the United States. Afghanistan, Mullah Omar represented no threat to the United States. Yeah. So we're in agreement that much of this stuff is being driven by your much beloved capitalism that is infecting politics.
I think it's one of those weird areas where it's the perfect storm again. So I think the right has this bad mix of politics of the lobbying and isolationism. I think the left also has it where a lot of the left wants to be the global parent to come in and help some of these countries. So you see Syria and you see what is a bad situation in Syria. It was a bad situation for a lot of people. And so you want to go help, but the repercussions of that and what that means, putting the stick in the eye of some of the really bad people that aren't necessarily Syria or a country is a problem.
Using the military to help is almost an oxymoron. I mean,
yeah.
You know, if you're going to help people, that you send in, you know, Greenpeace or not even USAID. I mean, you know, we actually have government agencies that bring food in, you know, or fund the United Nations, humanitarian programs. But, you know, that's a whole completely different thing.
I think,
and how does this relate to the idea of the United States as empire, as worldwide empire?
So, I mean, I think that we view ourselves, we as an American people, I think Congress views us as an empire, and they see us going out. And what we tend to forget in the public policy realm is that every country has their different motivations. We see right now South Korea has their cabals. They have their Samsung, I think, is 20% of the South Korean economy, and they're defending Samsung using public policy. We see, you know, Russia acting in their own self-interest, Syria acting in their self-interest. We forget that we are not an empire, that other countries do act for themselves. And so when I hear that report, I hear things falling apart, but I hear somebody writing the report that still doesn't understand the point that the other countries are all acting in their self-interest.
Right. Well, there's two things that I wanted to raise. Number one is that, you know, when we had the Soviet Union, there was an ideology on the other side, communism.
Yeah.
And we fought communism to protect capitalism in theory, or to protect the capitalists. And so it wasn't a fight that I agreed with, you know, frankly, but you could understand, okay, there's some ideology here. But now China is our biggest trade partner.
Yeah.
You know, or if not biggest, damn close. And Russia is no longer communist. They're outdoing us in terms of capitalism, you know, in terms of, you know, laissez-faire capitalism, libertarian capitalism, as it were. So it's like, you know, what's the purpose of empire if you don't have, you know, why be Superman if there's no Lex Luthor? Number one. And number two, there's this theory about the collapse, about wars, what provokes wars. That the number one thing that predictably will start a war is when a great power begins to disintegrate at the same time, or begins to diminish in its power at the same time that a previously non-great power becomes a great power. And we're seeing now China has surpassed the United States economically just in the last 2 years. as the largest economy in the world. And they're going to get way ahead of us. I mean, they got 1 billion people. We only have 300 million. And they are industrializing like nobody's business, and they're using the exact same trade policies we used in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s to build the American middle class. They're doing that with the China. So, you know, this could put us in a position of war. Your thoughts on those two points?
I see that happening. I look at China a little differently, and I see the way that business is reacting to China a little differently. I see that Congress doesn't quite understand what's going on. But, you know, China had their renaissance, and they started celebrating intellectual property. They now file more patents every year than
any other country in the world.
Than any other country in the world. And not only do they file those patents, but they're also protecting them. And so that means some of our intellectual property cases are going over there. And that's that research and development. That's what keeps the U.S. ahead of other countries. And so I don't think that the U.S. businesses are just going to necessarily lay down and give up, though. I think that they're going to fight. And so they're
going to fight for their cheap labor?
I don't think that means going to war. I think that I don't see war as the necessary first outcome. Maybe as we progress down the line, but I see China, if they surpass us and the economic fight doesn't win, I see the war being pretty far down the road.
Yeah, I would hope so, and common sense would indicate that. But this whole historical perspective, you know, really gives one pause. And at the same time, I mean, China is developing the Spratly Islands, and they're saber rattling over Taiwan. And then Donald Trump made this terrible faux pas of calling the Taiwanese, new president and congratulating them. And you know, China's not happy right now. So, and then we got North Korea in the mix. It's getting very, very messy. Anyhow, I wanted to get your thoughts on that, Charles. And Charles Sauer, Libertarian economist and president of the Market Institute, marketinstitute.org. You can tweet him at Charles Sauer, SAUER. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back.